Shell?
Daniel,
OG
OG
Rose?
Rose, and today we're going to talk about the convivial life, the convivial renaissance in honor of Ivan Illich. The term he said we kind of need convivial technology, not manipulative technology, technology that enabled us, not disabled us, that you could say extended the human versus contributed to our replacement. And really, what we were going to do today is really to kind of talk about what a socioeconomic system, society, nation, however you want to language it, would look like that really took seriously the social coordination mechanism, that really allowed itself to be coordinated by the SCM. What perhaps would need to occur for that to happen? A lot of these thoughts perhaps would be scattered across the net, say the replacement of the resume with the portfolio,
Mm,
the ability to invest in people, not just corporations,
mhm.
the removal of the certification or the college monopoly on credentials and what
Yeah.
that would unlock. And, the first thing, for example, is we have to see a lot of marketing. Deidre McCloskey points out before, everyone hates marketing, but the alternative to marketing is force. So
Mhm.
don't be so quick to say you hate marketing.
Ugh,
Um, Furthermore, if you never know that this new oven has been invented that can solve some of your problems because nobody markets because they don't want to bother you, then you're stuck with this oven for the rest of your life that isn't self cleaning or something. So, there's something to be said about marketing, but things like marketing, certification, resumes, all of these can be seen as dealing with coordination problems. Because let's say you're a CEO and you're trying to find the best person to hire for your company. Well, how would you look across a crowd and have any idea who you would hire and who you would not, right?
Mhm.
Well, you'd say, well, they've got this resume, okay, from this college. Oh, it's really good. But you see, of course, everyone knows someone could have a good resume and just have played the game and got taken the easy classes, right? But nevertheless, the CEO may even look at you and say, well, I know that, but what else am I supposed to do? Like,
Yeah.
what
Yeah.
other way am I supposed to get a signal, right?
Yeah.
And so there's constantly this information problem that we have to deal with. I'd be
Right.
curious, any opening thoughts?
Yeah, no, that's all good. And I was thinking about how it reminded me of in one of our other conversations when you mentioned the internet renaissance because it's related.
Oh, yeah.
Like
Oh,
it's
yeah.
very, very, very much related. Um and I guess I was also thinking about the fact that there does seem to be a new potential for um, assessing and judging, but like by the people, if you will, almost like more democratic, if we
Yes.
could say that.
Hmm.
Um, so, for example, the fact that people already on their own use YouTube for certain things, like they'll just go and whatever they watch their things they want to watch or learn about or
Yes.
whatever. And it does sort of, in some ways, that can be like, though there can be some pretty staggeringly bad statistics about internet use, etc., which are obviously very troubling. However, the fact that people would, on their own, use YouTube to learn stuff, and that like it's not uncommon actually that people would do such a thing, is pretty amazing, and actually is should I think instill some hope for humanity and for the future for people because it's like that alone I think gets overlooked a lot.
Yeah, and in a sense, there's always just been this kind of assumption that people don't learn unless you make them.
Exactly.
You got
Whereas
to put it.
it kind of shows that people actually will learn
Yeah.
on their own if they're driven by their own whatever need, desire.
Hmm.
Like they'll go and find out a way to learn about stuff through by their on their own.
Yeah, I think Aristotle and there's this idea that humans are a learning being, a learning animal, right? But there's also been an idea of like, yeah, nah, when people are left to their own devices, they'll just eat junk food and watch TV. They're not going to read Hegel or something
Hmm.
like that,
Hmm.
right? But actually, maybe that was just more of a result of a
Access.
lack of access and
Yeah.
transaction costs, because it turns out that a lot of people. I'm amazed at how many people are interested, and Sweeney has noted this. How many people are interested in reading very difficult books without getting paid, without certification. For most of history, though, if you wanted to find five people that wanted to read James Joyce or go through the church fathers or whatever, the likelihood of finding them was very, very low. But if people can find others to share their readings with or read with, then maybe it is not the case that people are so unwilling to engage in hard text and learning. It's just that it has seemed like that for most of history to the transaction costs, due to the difficulty and logistical demands.
Yeah. No, absolutely. And it also makes me, I don't know, as you were talking, it was just making me think about like the 80s and 90s. Like there almost seems to have been, in a sense, though those time periods could be assessed on other terms as quite successful, et cetera. What I mean to say is that there's something about like the saturation. It makes me think of Ebert's point on saturation because I think there was kind of an explosion of entertainment options,
Yes.
that those were accessible,
Yes.
you know, and those were usually controlled more or less by certain programmings, right, that has existed. And when that was the case, again, like for example, I never heard or had access to sort of, besides like the History Channel
Yes.
on
Yeah. Yeah.
TV,
Yeah.
like there
But then
weren't
you
a
don't
whole lot of.
control what they're showing. You don't
Exactly,
control what the
exactly.
shows are or whatever.
Yeah, I didn't necessarily have avenues to learn about Kierkegaard or
No,
Hegel
even if
or
you wanted to.
yeah, even if you wanted to, like through the TV.
Yeah.
So I think there's a lot of interesting things to say that maybe that was true in an age of TV or
Yes.
certain mediums.
Historically
Yeah,
contingent.
yeah, that people would, if left to their own devices, just kind of veg out on
Yeah.
kind of junk programming, right? But um, there's always been probably even in those times people trying to use the mediums in inventive or interesting ways or whatever, maybe more linked with narrative, et cetera, et cetera. But yeah, there is something about the decentralization that actually has proliferated. You could say there's, yeah, in a sense, there's even more entertainment, but there's also less top down, or there's still top down control, of course, but there is less, or at least there's just this little edge of it being able to be subverted by the people themselves.
Completely.
And so once what you see is that people really go in that direction of, uh, basically again, just utilizing the web for what they want to learn about. And yeah, you could be saying, well, that's sort of idealistic or optimistic, because a lot of people do just
Sure.
you know, just
Sure.
basically, yeah, it's junk food, right? That they're
Sure.
doing through their phone or
Sure.
through YouTube or whatever. Yeah, but the fact that you see a certain channel teaching on X thing has a certain amount of subscribers, even, and like
Yes.
commentary and like engagement, like that is fascinating. And yeah, sure, maybe the junk food channels are still going to have like the
Yes.
higher numbers, but the fact that there's even some sort of competition, and people who get critical, or skeptical of the bigger channels that are like kind of using the tactics or whatever, the clickbaits and all that.
Yes.
So I do think that it's just very, very fascinating. Like we live in a very interesting time in that regard. And um you know where maybe libraries were your place to kind of go
Yeah.
and read the books and see, have maybe stumble into somebody who would want to talk to you about Hegel. Now you have the potential through the web to do so.
Yes.
And it's almost like the essence of a library for the diversity and the global pluralism of ideas is more accessible to all of us through the internet.
I
um
mean, for most of history, there's a bunch of things. That was very good. I mean, there's a bunch of things. There's always been a bunch of claims about human nature. What is human nature?
mhm,
There's a real sense in which we haven't actually had the infrastructure or coordination technologies by which to meaningfully see what is human nature, like in
mhm,
certain circumstances, right? I mean, you could say that the great conservative liberal split in at least America has been: are humans innately good or are they innately evil? It seems as if humans are innately tragic. They're making trade-offs. They're confused by what is good. They're innately ironic. But also, there's really also another sense in which there's been a lack there's been a lack of a good space, a good laboratory by which to actually get readings, a good sense of what is human nature and what humans will do. Because again, and I'm not saying that applies in all areas, but there's been a kind of assumption that humans will not, they basically don't learn unless you force them to.
mhm,
And that may not be true. Now, of course, like you're saying, even if what we're seeing on the SCM is, or online, is just a small percentage, it's a larger percentage than you would have thought. And I would argue giant cultural changes tend to be exponential
mhm,
curves. Nothing, 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 then very big. An exponential curve is two, the famous, way to understand an exponential curve is if you tell someone, okay, I've got a bunch of beans in a jar, and they're doubling, every minute, right? So it goes from 2 to 4, 4 to 8, 8 to 16, and so on. The question is the following: at what point in it, and at 1 o'clock, the jar is entirely filled. So the question is the following: at what point is the jar halfway filled? The high majority of people say 12:30, but it's 12:59. The jar is
mhm,
halfway filled till 12:59. And the point of an
mhm.
exponential curve, and the reason why
So
this is so important, is because until basically 12:55, it looks like nothing is happening. Like nothing is happening. And I think culture develops via plausibility struggles, and it's more like an exponential curve, and that is a giant tick.
oh yeah, go get.
Yeah, and culture is more like an exponential curve. So when you say, well, it doesn't look like anything is happening or whatever, well, that's how it That's how it is. It's not going to look like anything is happening until, and then suddenly and all at once, it will be everyone is is engaging in the social coordination mechanism in a new way. Now, of course, maybe not, and everyone is a relative term, and there's always going to be difference. But also, this is why you need that hunter faithful presence,
Mm.
because if you start at 12, with the cultural alternative, then you're going to have a faithful presence to the work, believing in it, and investing yourself as if it's an exponential curve, and it's going to feel like it's just a small thing until basically 12:55, and arguably until 12:58 and 12:59. So you've got to keep the faith in that sense, right? And I do think cultural transformation requires that. And I guess the other thing what's so interesting about our moment is there's a way in which, as Robert Putnam's bowling alone applied, and the bowling alleys went away, the Lions Club, and whatever, you've actually at the same time actually generated a technology, um, this mixture of YouTube, Zoom, we've talked about a million times, the social coordination mechanism that actually enables forms of social gathering and coordination and innovation that could have never occurred before. So it's precisely when the owl of Nineveh flies at dusk in that Hegel sense. It's precisely at the this kind of nadir of social and of community and social and the loss of those things that you generate the technology to really enable social coordination that we've never seen before. And you can imagine this being used to actually bring back libraries, because you
Mhm.
can actually use them to coordinate with real live spaces like the
Mhm.
libraries or the Lions clubs or the diners. This
Mhm.
technology happening online could be precisely the savior or something that really helps online spaces. And we just can't predict all the innovative ways that people may figure out how to use social coordination online with real spaces and so on and so forth.
Yeah, no, that's good. That's good. And I was thinking to go back to like just the concept of the convivial renaissance and how that could look for lots of things. Um, how, I mean, I guess there's a kind of nagging question that comes to my mind of like that's again that's a lovely idea, and I think it's a very again like I was pointing to there's evidence to believe that it's really feasible. Like
Yeah.
it's even something people seem to do unprompted, right?
Yes.
But if you have like state intervention,
Yeah. Yeah.
how
Yeah.
do
Yeah.
you like
Yeah.
how
Yeah.
do
Yeah.
you
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
like do you have to kind of just get and maybe it is. I think there could possibly be room for this where people just sort of sign up to say and I've seen this with some certain farms really like who might want to sell direct to buyer, et
Yeah.
cetera, where they might just say, I agree that we're bypassing all of the like the kind of
Yes.
state things
Yes.
because there's a
Yes.
question of how to I mean there's a lot of arenas where you don't really have it's not as like for example when we're talking about people learning about stuff on YouTube and then like maybe resurrecting a Lions Club because they all want to read
Mhm.
Hegel or something and maybe meet in a
Yeah.
certain town that
Yes.
they find or they do meetings or maybe they don't meet
Mhm.
every week or something that again the question of the state doesn't feel as
Drawing.
pressing or
Yes.
relevant.
Yes. But
But
when you get into the
yeah,
other, it does.
once you get into other stuff like restaurants or like products or yeah selling stuff or the market itself becoming like in the market itself being able to be I don't want to say redeemed because
Yeah.
but there are a lot of like issues I think sometimes with the market and I understand, like, it's probably just doing the best that it can. It believes to be the best that it can do. But the idea of like infusing it with new life, new productivity, new ideas, new possibilities for people is necessary. Like especially with costs that feel so constraining on people, or higher cost on things that were just basic
Yeah.
necessities. Um, so there seems to be like a need for some new potentiality there. So yeah, basically I'm just saying that in that arena of the market and the convivial, but then this constraint of potential regulation, how does it can it bypass it? And maybe it just goes back to what I first kind of mentioned is that maybe it just goes to people saying, yeah, we agree that we don't care about that.
Yeah.
And enough people doing that to afford some other third way or not third way, but yeah. Well, it's kind of like it's either under the table, right? That's maybe one way. Then doing it all regulated. And
Yeah.
then the third way of like people saying, no, we're doing this out loud, but we're just making sure people, it just relies on people agreeing to the fact that there might not be, say, state inspection on X, Y, or Z. What do you think
Yeah.
about that?
No. I mean, this is getting. This is getting into kind of the larger. vision of, I suppose, a convivial renaissance, which is a tentative term I'm just using, we're just using this afternoon, but maybe we call it the convivial renaissance. I mean, we've talked about the convivial life when we taught Ivan Illich, because a lot of this. So Ivan Illich is concerned about the certification regime. He's concerned about resumes. I mean, you can think about Milton Friedman talking about the problem with having to get certification and licensing, the
Right.
licensing regime.
Well, practically speaking, somebody's got an idea. They're really excited
Yes.
about it. They're willing to put in the work and the effort, but they hit all these requirements
Yeah.
for, oh, you have to have three syncs to
eh,
do this and
Yeah.
whatever it is.
Yeah.
And you're just like,
And
never
so,
mind. And you're scared you're going to miss something
yes,
and
and
then
get
get,
sued,
yeah.
and
So
then
you're just like, never mind. This really
yes.
is a huge deal though, because a lot of people who could otherwise start businesses don't.
No, it's terrible. But then also people are like, well, you don't want to get sick, do you?
Yeah.
And this
The social
also
pressure kind of.
there's a million things. I mean, there's a bunch of things because in belonging again, and this is likely part three stuff because that's the file on the computer where that has all this stuff. And the term that's used to refer to this broader movement of infrastructural, legal, regulational changes
Hmm.
that could, in my opinion, unleash the social coordination mechanism, unleash its fullest potential, is word the term is word spread.
Hmm.
And the reason we use that term is because we're thinking about the unleashing of voicecraft, because I think it's the unleashing of allowing language to be the main coordination mechanism versus certification and so on. So as we talk today, I mean, there's a bunch of things that all need elaboration, but today, just kind of pointing to, I suppose, the larger horizon of possibilities is you can kind of almost, I guess for me, sometimes I think about this word spread or this larger vision almost in three main areas.
Okay.
And this is all tentative
Sure, sure.
because
And it would be facilitated by the SEM.
yes, that the SCM can uniquely enable that overcomes what I don't know if I want to say inefficiency of the market, but incompleteness of the market or the
Hmm.
pricing mechanism. Things that with the SCM, the pricing mechanism will do a whole lot better.
Hmm.
So generally, we can talk, and I'm going to really be thinking it kind of with Ivan Illich. So
Hmm.
we can say that there's the learning web
Hmm.
dimension, which Ivan Illich talked a lot about learning webs. And I think
Hmm.
mostly what we're seeing on the SCM is a lot of learning web.
Yeah, that's awesome.
And then it just turns out that actually learning and community go together. That people
Hmm.
like to be with people that they learn with or have insight with, and they'll go and hang out at someone's home for 9 hours if they can feel like they have a really engaging conversation. Well, I associate that dialogos with learning web.
Hmm.
Now, I'm not saying it's just learning web. I'm just thinking macro categories here. There's a learning web. So another major category is the regulation certification problem, of which even if you could use your house as a restaurant
Yeah.
and use your home to make money off of that,
Right.
there's a regulatory system that makes it very difficult. There's a tax system that makes that very difficult. And we also have a culture to distrust a lack of certification
Sure.
for good and for bad, because you could have people that take advantage of you,
Yeah. Yeah.
right? So you
Sure.
have this
Sure.
kind of certification thing. And then another side of this is actually more of the web 3.0, and this gets into stuff like the Bitcoin,
Hmm.
the
Blockchain.
blockchain, trust wallet, things like this that are really going to be talking about the possibility of how we can move to investing in people, not just corporations, how we can actually do equity in individuals, because I think it's a very big deal. Because like right now, if I want to support someone online,
Hmm.
say Marcus, because he was here, then I would have to just give him $100 or buy his course or something, right? I think that puts a ceiling to how much something can grow. But if instead I could say, well, I'm going to put $100 in Marcus or Cadell or Tim or whoever, because I think actually in 20 years they're going to be very successful,
Yeah.
and my $100 could turn into $1,000.
Right.
Well, then it's a potential non-zero sum, right?
Hmm.
A lot of people put their money in the stock market because it's a potential of your money making money off of money,
Hmm.
right?
Hmm.
But then the structure is set up to where basically only corporations can benefit from equities. To really, really, in my opinion, have capitalism explode in a certain way, you need the option of investing in individuals.
Hmm.
You need the ability to invest in channels, not just give money to channels, not just support them, but literally create non-zero sum relationships. Now,
Hmm.
that's kind of the web. So you have this Web 3.0 certification and learning
Learning
web.
webs. Yeah.
Okay, now those are three different areas. All of them need massive expansion. The thing I just said about Web 3.0 gets into stuff like yes, no coins, tokenization, Like, if you could invest in research, as you think, I think these people who are betting that the quantum computer is impossible because the wave collapse, the collapsing wave is what waves do, that it's impossible to maintain a superposition. And I'm going to put down $10,000 and take that bet, and because I believe that will turn into 100,000, then you have a very different world. And I think the response to this is like, oh, you're talking probability markets and things like that. I'm not really sure. Probability markets to me are getting at it, but not quite what I have in mind. Now the poly markets and different things. Now that all has to be expanded upon, but there are three areas, and the other area as well is basically lawsuits. We need losers pay in the United States of America. Meaning, if I sue someone and I lose, I have to pay for their court fees because right now, basically, there's a lack of skin in the game
Mm,
for
mm,
lawsuits. So there are
mhm.
various in colleges have a monopoly on credentials. There are
Right.
jobs you can't get unless you go to college. Well, if they're so great, why do they need that monopoly? They should be
Mm,
able to beat the crap out of some kid off that just taught themselves off the internet, right? So
mhm,
you need credential competition, which right now, in my opinion, credentials are mostly a monopoly form. And the argument is the social coordination mechanism enables all of these things. I'm going to pause. Your question was very. There's more to be said, but that's kind of opening. That's kind of a vision of three main areas to think
mm,
about. And I guess I put the legal stuff under the certification, but you could argue there's a fourth one, which is the area of law, which would include the tax system, because I think the tax system is a problem as well. The tax system scares entrepreneurs; it scares them to death. Where if you just had the flat, something like flat tax and so on, that
mm,
would be very good. And there is a way also as well, interestingly enough, there's a lot of what is being said here does kind of gesture in the direction of, say, a Milton Friedman or Austrian or libertarianism or so on. Libertarianism without the social coordination mechanism ultimately, in my opinion, fell under the technological essence. It
mm,
just served technology, and it also was not able to sustain the social. Um, e- so libertarianism or something like it, or federalism even, a more limited government, which those are not identical, required the social coordination mechanism, and we've never had it. The dream of America, in my opinion, the full kind of completion of that dream of freedom, like someone like a Dr. Vaughn will talk about, and that all has to be gotten into, has not really been possible without the social coordination mechanism, because all of that's going to require effective coordination outside just pricing.
mm.
And we haven't had that. So anyway,
Yeah, no, that's all very good. I guess there are some, yeah, it seems like there are some things even policy wise that would be would be we're theorizing better if they could be adjusted. Like
oh
again,
yes, absolutely. But
so
we can do the learning web stuff even if the
yeah, yeah,
policy
yeah.
stuff's not there. And
Exactly.
maybe success in the learning web stuff
Exactly.
would actually pressure the politicians to change the other things.
Very, very likely. Well, you can see that happening even now. So
Yes.
I think there are certainly pressures on the institutions because of the learning webs online.
Hmm.
Like where they're saying like, oh, we better do like an online, like they'll
Yes.
do these things where they basically kind of want to incorporate
The
the thing.
online. But the
Yeah.
problem is they're doing what they do as colleges online, but you actually have to change the way you
Oh yeah.
teach and do
It has to
things.
be a
It's
completely
not
different
just
form.
you can't just do it
They'll just do
online.
it online and
Yeah.
boom. But I'm saying like they'll do what was that thing that Harvard Kashir did it. He like helped host
Oh
like
yeah,
the
yeah, yeah, yeah,
that's
yeah,
really
yeah.
cool.
The Life itself did a kind of
And was that through like
conference.
Harvard?
Yeah, that was at Harvard.
Harvard, yeah.
Yeah.
So, like for example, they're doing things like that where they're
Yes.
like, let's actually like engage in the dialogue of
Yeah.
what's
What's
going on
happening?
online.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, which I think is a good
Step.
start. It's a really good step, and I think that's. But what I mean to say is, they wouldn't even feel the need to do that if they didn't start to feel the pressure of, oh wow, people are really
Potentially, yeah.
like,
Absolutely.
people are really doing this whole thing online. They're having conversations online. I mean, you could always just bubble yourself off and say and just ignore it and always just call it, um, you know, um,
Weird.
weird, yeah, like not legit, whatever it is. And I'm sure that there is a
Of
temptation
course.
for
Of
institutions to
course.
do that sort of thing. So the fact that they might like, tip their hat at it by doing something like that is, it's a step in that direction. But what I mean to say is like, the more that the social in the social coordination mechanism does the things that it will or that it demonstrates is the, I don't know, perhaps the desire of the human in this point in our historic moment. um yeah, there can be, like you're saying about this idea of it being in a sense pressured or it forces its hand, where suddenly they maybe have to make changes policy wise because they're seeing a,
Yes.
a greater number of people doing something alternative.
Well, there's opportunity for the state to respond to that, for
Yeah, the
politicians
state,
who
the
want to
institutions.
acknowledge it, people who
Yeah.
want to get elected. I mean, Studebaker talks in his excellent book on the way being shut, right? Like, if you want to
Hmm.
access the state and change it internally, you cannot do that, right?
Hmm.
So we have to operate outside the state,
Yeah.
but in a kind of grassroots way, on the
Sure. Sure.
road, or in the place of ideas, to reference Hingels and Marcus's work. But what you do outside is not also going to have to follow institutional incentives or the special interests groups that Rauch or Olson talk
Hmm.
about, that have really kind of made the state ineffective. But also the state is all powerful. It's this weird thing where the state is all powerful but also very ineffective. It's osmostrified, you could say, a term I'm not saying properly. And then you get into the Koratani idea that the market, the state, it's all kind of linked together in the capital nation state,
Hmm.
as Michelle Bowens talks about. Well, what do you do then? Are you doomed? Well, what you need to do is have an alternative means of coordination, collective action, of which could show an alternative way of light outside the reach of the state, you could even say, that the state may try to crush, but also the state could look at and actually say, there's something alternative here, or you could have people basically be less impacted by what the state is doing because of the collective action they form. And also people may feel more meaningful lives. Marcus was making the point, I forget the name of the curve, on this idea that there seems to be people will often be willing to make less money if they have more social engagement or social opportunities. Like, people are satisfied with that, right? Well, right now, though, there's not a means of effective social coordination by which people could make that trade-off, even if they wanted to, right? But if it was, and then they maybe not feel represented, maybe they don't feel represented by the government, maybe they don't feel like the market is treating them well. But if they're able to have effective social coordination or community, or maybe start their own entrepreneurship and feel like they're not going to be destroyed by the IRS, they might be okay with it. But right now, people feel like they're not represented by the government and the market is not fair, and that's their only option, is to do well in the government or the market. So they throw a bomb at it. They revolt, they uprise, and that's where you get the extreme popularism or political extremism, right? Because there's no other, I want to say, pressure valve
Hmm.
to let things go or different. But let me throw it at you.
Yeah. Yeah. No, that's all good. That's all good. And I guess I was just kind of thinking back on like the term, um, like if we're going back to the site, that the concept of the convivial, um, there's something. Well, I'm thinking about the root meaning of that being like with life, right? Like,
Yep.
and I was thinking about the fact that, so we're talking about this idea of it being a potentiality for, um, yeah, new life to come to the system, et cetera, et cetera. Um, but like, I guess I want to ask maybe a more pointed question on let's say the SCM's ability to do like, if so those three areas to me, what I see as like the most evident one is obviously, like you were saying, the learning webs is the one that's the social
Yep.
coordination mechanism sort of allows for and
Which
affords.
enables philosophizing your life in line with season 2, as we
Yeah,
talked
yeah.
about.
And then, so okay, then we've got, what do we say,
Certification.
yeah,
Yeah,
all of that.
regulations,
Yeah.
yes. Well, you could just say legal, maybe, as a broad
Yeah.
category.
I mean, what I kind of feel like what's happening with that arena is that the learning webs challenge that,
Yes, they do
obviously,
challenge it.
right?
Yes.
So that's kind of the relationship there. And then the web 3.0 one is maybe the one that
More
feels
vague.
most,
Yeah, it's
yeah.
most vague because that's where you need the most explanation and so on, right?
Well, there's a level of expertise in that arena which
Mhm.
is necessary to create, almost, I want to say, the programming by which people can utilize,
Yes.
like, have actual, again, like mechanisms, if you will, right, to use a social coordination
Yes.
mechanism for being able to do certain structures of investment, right?
Well, I mean, it also gets into the blockchain, and there was a talk with Michelle Bowens at VoiceCraft where we got a bit into it on how what the blockchain may enable is, for example, right now your birth certificate is a piece of paper that
Yeah.
if you lose, you're in trouble, your social
Yeah.
security number, and you have all these middlemen, like verifiers
Yeah.
of your bank transactions or
Right.
whatever.
Right.
Let me just say, these middle people make up a massive amount of the economy. And blockchain may actually be able to more efficiently do a lot of that.
Mm-hmm.
And that would actually liberate individuals for business transactions,
Mm-hmm.
or to start their own businesses, or to do things without
Mm-hmm.
as much reliance on, say, the Social Security Department or the
Mm-hmm.
IRS or all of
Mm-hmm.
these different things.
Mm-hmm.
You could take out a incredible amount of paperwork, we could say.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a huge deal
Yeah.
because even things like having needing someone to notarize papers at a bank. Well, they have a lot of power then. You need them to notarize, right?
Yeah.
Or if you need a social security number to function, well, the state's really powerful,
Yeah.
right? But if you were able to decentralize all that middleman work, that's a
Yeah.
big deal. So there's two things with the Web 3.0 stuff, all of which is extremely vague at this point and must be elaborated on. And there's been talks here and there about it, but it's the potential to remove the middlemen, which gets into the managerial class that Buchanan warns about that has really hurt
Mhm.
capitalism, all
Mhm.
these middle managers and all of that, which of course that's a broad category and that needs to be explained. But the blockchain potential and the potential for basically investing in people to democratize equity. Because right now, equity is basically concentrated in corporations. So of course, corporations run everything. Because I want to make the argument that basically equity, the ability to invest, really decides who has all the power.
Hmm.
And if corporations are the only things you can invest in, then yeah, they're going to run the country. It's not simply because they can obviously they have special interest groups that petition the government, K Street, and they run in that, and that makes them very powerful. But also, it cannot be overstated on how everyone's retirement funds being tied to the corporations, their Roth IRAs or whatever, and then there are just their access to liquidity through the equity market. That goes a very long way to making corporations so large. And I also don't want to say corporations are necessarily evil. I just want to say that if there's basically only one, the the more you have concentrated choice like if the only way you can do equity is in corporations, you should expect inefficiency. The ecosystem is not diverse enough. But if you could do equity investment in YouTube channels like voicecraft, and Nvidia and individuals and this local farm down the street and take equity stakes in all of them as held on, say, the blockchain, that would be a very, very big deal. Now all of that has to be elaborated on, and there are counters and saying that's not even a possible technology, and then what is even the means of judging success, blah 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 blah. But the point is that's a really that would really open up a lot. And you could also say even if you fail in the Web 3.0 area, the learning web stuff in of itself is enough to cause a cultural
Mhm.
renaissance,
Mhm.
right? But then if the I would argue if the legal stuff can work at least to some degree,
Mhm.
then the rate of the exponential curve developing will accelerate,
Mhm.
right? Does that make
Yeah,
sense?
that makes sense. That does make sense. I guess too. I was thinking like if we're thinking about Illich's vision of a
Hmm.
convivial life, um, maybe it's more of a question of maybe somebody's still sitting there thinking like, okay, but I'm still not sure how like all that you're talking about
Sure.
would lead to a convivial life.
Yeah.
What
Right.
what are the qualities of a convivial
Yeah.
life? Now, I
Right.
think like the one again that feels most accessible is learning webs. So for me, how I would answer that question is to think about how it can animate, like
Oh
how
yeah.
learning webs animate people
Yeah.
in their particularities and in their their geolocational areas, their
Yes.
givenness, et cetera, et cetera.
Energetically change them,
Yeah,
stuff like that, yeah.
yeah, like how it can provide a kind of new capacity to, like we talk about all the time, right, like to encounter otherness, handle difference of the global pluralistic age, etc., where you can start to learn a type of stability within yourself, all while you also are tested, like we talked about with the limits, right, tested on the encounter with difference
Right.
and see how that plays out energetically. So yeah, maybe the more specific question is like, well, Daniel, what would a convivial life like feel like, look like?
Yeah.
And
Yeah, yeah,
then
yeah.
second of all, how do these things about like, you know being able to start business more easily, or this, that, the
Yeah.
other, even learning webs, maybe for somebody who's not as familiar with learning webs, like how would that translate into a convivial life? So those two questions I'll send to you.
Yeah, well, if you just wanted to paint very broad visions, like images, and if we kind of shelf the question, is it possible or not,
Okay,
and
yeah,
just try
think.
to think what it would look like,
Hmm.
because social imagination, if you can't even imagine the vision, you may not even bother to deal with the legal and regulatory challenges
Hmm.
and so on
Hmm.
and so forth, right? Um, Well, imagine if, for example, you could make, I'll just make this example. You said, we're going to make our home a restaurant,
Hmm.
and we're going to have once a month, people can get reservations and they can have dinner at our home. And it will be $500. There won't be a menu. And you come up with all of this idea,
Sure, sure.
and so on. Um, you just want to make $500 here and there. And maybe it's all word of mouth.
Hmm.
This is completely unimaginable with in 1991, right? And even if it was, it would be the regulatory problem. You couldn't do that and so
Mhm.
forth. Imagine all the regulations went away. And imagine that you were allowed to do that. Well, with the social coordination mechanism,
Mhm.
people you meet online who you could offer it to, you could do that,
Mhm.
right? And also, let's say you could have a YouTube channel that actually showed, and maybe it only had 200 subscribers.
Yeah.
But something we forget: if you had an auditorium and you were giving a presentation and 200 people showed up, that would be pretty remarkable,
It would
right?
be.
And if you had a commercial that 200 people saw, that would be pretty good,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So if you have a channel of 200 and you show this, and out of those 200, 10 of the people come up, well, that's 10 people. So there's 10 months. You're doing this once a month, and each one of them gives you $500. So you're looking at $5,000 that you've now added to your account. Maybe you do it twice a month and you have like $10,000, right? And you're able to show that, and you're able to kind of turn your home into
Mhm.
actually a business that's relative to what you want to do,
Mhm.
and you don't have to worry about the regulate. Let's just imagine you didn't have to worry about any regulations.
None.
None
Nothing.
at all, right? Like let me if imagine what you like everyone listening to this, imagine what kind of businesses you would do if I told you you never have to worry about filing taxes, you never have to worry about regulations, and you never have to worry about certification. You could literally do anything, right? There is a very real sense in which the libertarian free market dream is not possible until that world shows up. Now, that could be where everyone gets food poisoning and dies because the restaurants are bad, and that's why the government's like, well, you don't want that. Of course. But there's also something to be said that risk has to be taken somewhere,
Yeah.
right? And if we're not
Mhm.
taking risk in this, then the risk may just go into too big to fail banks or something.
Can I
Please.
just interject really
Yes.
quickly? Well, I think something interesting is that because I was thinking about the church earlier when you were talking about investing in somebody and
Yes.
then, basically being able to make money off of money because if
Yes.
they're doing well, then you
Yes.
get to do well,
Yes.
da da da.
Yes.
Okay. Well, that's kind of always what, in a sense, even though it's
Yes.
hang with me, it's abstract, but the church also had this concept of like you invest. You
Yes.
will get something out of this.
Yes.
Maybe it's not direct.
Yes.
Obviously, it's not
Yes.
like here you
Yes.
tithe and then
There
you
will
get
be a
that.
return.
But there'll be a return on investment in
Yes.
terms of your, well, not just the hope is that your spiritual growth, your
Yes.
communal growth, your sense of belonging, all of those things, right? So you
Mhm.
get a return on investment.
Yes.
Um, and uh, and also sometimes it's actual stuff, meals that are provided, all these types of things, right? Shelter or like, cost for
Yes.
doing this, that, or going maybe doing on
Mhm.
whatever camping, sure, just things like that that get covered, right, by a church body or something
Yes.
like this. Um, so and I know, so I was thinking about that point. Then the second point is that, it's interesting for people who like do, just basically connect via some connection point, right? The
Yes.
church or the bowling, whatever. Like they'll share meals with each other, but like, you know, why aren't you worried about like the regulation there? Like
Of
you're not
course.
worried about
Of course.
regulation at
We
that
pick
person's
and
home.
choose. We pick
Yeah,
and
so like
choose.
it's just that what I mean to say is like the social trust
Yes.
is
It's all
far
about trust. All
greater
about trust.
than regulation. I mean, even though I guess, regulations there because they're like, yeah, we know you can't build trust with everybody, so that's why we're going to just do it for you with
Yes.
regulation. I get it, but that's why this idea of the social coordination mechanism can be so
Yes.
so powerful and have a greater weight, like a greater. How do I want to put this? Um, it's like it does the work of that trust,
Yes.
maybe even more so because, like I was saying yesterday, like but places get regulated, you still find a cockroach
Yeah,
running
you
around
even if they're
across the
regulated.
floor.
Yeah,
Like
right, right,
it's
right.
not always, they clean up. Restaurants can clean up quite a bit if they know inspectors coming or
Yes.
whatever.
Yes.
So I'm not trying to say question all
Yes.
restaurants. I'm just saying that people also can find ways around certain regulations, unfortunately. But trust cannot be like that's a
Yes.
fundamental thing between people, and
Yes.
that's why I think obviously relationships can feel very scary, though, of
Yes.
course, because well, what if they don't, or what if they
Yeah.
poison me, or what if they
Yeah.
do this, or what
Yeah.
if like
Yeah. Yeah.
they didn't mean to, but they got us sick or something. I don't know, whatever it is.
Yeah,
Like,
but what
they
if
had
the
they had a fever, they didn't say it, and now like you got a fever or something. I don't know.
Of
But I'm
course.
just saying, like, there's always that potential risk wherever it is, whether it's in regulation land or relationships that require trust. But the fact of the matter is the building of trust amongst one another is essentially like I want to say that
Yes.
is the kind of regulatory principle at play
Yes.
in the like in a sort of a metaphysical concept that people choose and that people determine and that people say if they feel comfortable with or not.
Yes.
And that social trust is again what goes into why somebody would feel comfortable because they know the person's character, they
Yes.
know who they are, and they know like they have enough trust in them to say they wouldn't do something like
Yes.
that, so I'm going to trust them and I'm going to buy
Yes.
the food from them or whatever
Yes.
it is,
Yes.
or I'm going to get this thing from them, or they
Yes.
always like they've just shown their customer service,
Yes.
ness, if you will, of being able to repair and work with me, and so I go back to them. So anyway, I guess was just thinking about that too really quick. But go back to your point about like if there was none of this, like what,
Yes, and I'm not saying there shouldn't be any regulation. I'm
no, no,
just
yeah,
saying
sure, sure.
to have a starting vision, almost a state of nature that you can work back from, although I'm always very critical of state of nature or thought
Sure,
experiments. It just depends on what we mean.
sure.
But well, imagine that so regulation fills in a lack of the possibility of trust,
Hmm.
right? And you could, and one of the reasons why you have so many middlemen that the blockchain is trying to step in, because there's a way, and I think it's bad marketing. But the idea of the blockchain is it's trustless. You don't have to trust anything. It's just mathematical.
Hmm.
Like you can't. And the idea that that would actually paradoxically enable social
More
interaction because
trust.
yeah, it would enable more trust. Now, I don't think it's so simple because if you have something that doesn't require trust, it is that could train people out of the capacity
To
to
trust,
trust. So
yeah.
you get into all that. But nevertheless, there's this idea that the blockchain could help overcome the problem of trust at scale.
Hmm.
And definitely the state and regulation steps in to deal with the problem of trust at scale
Right.
because over a Dunbar number, you can only trust so many people, so on. Well, let's say the social coordination mechanism reduced the amount that the state had to worry about the trusted scale problem by 30%. Well, that could have extraordinary economic ramifications, right? And open extraordinary opportunities. And what if also too the people that you would say be buying your dairy products from,
Hmm.
they're going to be more local,
Right.
right? You're not going to be necessarily. It's not like right now. Certification tends to have to be very widespread. It's not just for the state of Virginia, but for the entire country, right? It's very big. You don't tend to have Campbell County regulation,
Mm.
right? But the social coordination mechanism would easily have a natural kind of especially when it comes to products that you would be buying, it could easily have a more natural limiting principle that would be within the bounds of things that you could trust or experience. And then also this gets into where the social coordination mechanism allows us with say the YouTube channel to replace the resume with the portfolio.
Yeah.
So instead of looking at somebody's resume, excuse me, that shows well they went to a farming school for 4 years or whatever, I just watch the video. And then of course I watch the video and I go down to the farm and try it out and it's terrible, well, then I never go again. It's no different than business, right? Or you go and you find out, no, it is really good, right? And let's say you go and you get food poisoning. Well, you don't go back, but you can get food poisoning at Long John Silver's or stuff. And also critically, there's always risk because yes, you can get food poisoning from the local farm, but the big banks could cause 2008 financial crisis, or the government gets you into World War III and drafts you, right?
Mhm.
Which is worse and which is better. I mean, there's a lot of people right now concerned about an AI bubble. Literally, the system is such that a few companies could be making financial decisions that affect you and me, even though we have no connection with it whatsoever because it could cause a financial crisis, right?
Exactly.
So it's this interesting idea that you just can't regulate yourself out of risk. You're going to take risks somewhere on the system.
Exactly.
And
Exactly.
arguably in I want to say complexity science thinking, what you want to do is have not like five huge risks that if they go wrong, we have World War III, but it'd be better to have hundreds of thousands, if not millions, of small
Yep.
risks that if they go bad, it only affects the people there, and it's contained, right? So yeah, maybe there's 20 local farms in the United States of America out of the 20,000 using the SEM that cause food poisoning. Well, they're going to get selected out because people don't tend to want to get food poisoning, right? And you
Mhm.
could say, well, what if some people die? That risk is there anyway with every single technology. And the question is simply, what is the best way to deal with the risk? Decentralization, breaking it up, or taking really large. Now, the logic of the system now, this is a larger question I'll throw to you, is basically too big to fail.
Yeah.
Make everything too big to fail, and then nothing will fail because if anything fails, everything falls apart,
Mhm.
right? That is basically the logic of the system. Now, that claim has to be justified, and I think we talk about it a lot in second thoughts. But that's a lot of the counter is if you just make things too big to fail, then nothing will fail. But I would argue what ends up happening in that is quality drops. Quality drops like a rock
Like a
because
rock.
there's no incentive for quality because it's too big to fail. So quality goes away. And if it's too big to fail, the quality isn't necessary to keep it going because
Mm.
it has to go no matter what. And I think we've actually seen that in many sectors of the economy, certainly fast food, where all the buildings now look to be the same because they're all actually secretly real estate companies in disguise. Anyway,
It's all like brutalism, yeah.
it's
Like
horrible.
the the
Remember
design,
when McDonald's were these, like, beautiful, playful places, and now the
that
Taco
little
Bell and the
Japanese roots.
Taco Bell, McDonald's, Burger King, they all look the same? It's because 'cause they're all
It's
real
a
estate
realism
companies.
type of
Yeah, it's all
architecture.
real estate companies. That's what they all secretly are. They're all just real estate companies. Anyway, I'll stop.
Well, two things. I want to put you on the spot to like say
Please.
why that leads to the convivial life a little
Sure.
bit more.
Sure, 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 sure.
Like what I mean, the question to me, it makes me think of being childlike again. You know, when
Yes.
kids just like, oh, I'm gonna make this business, and you have
Yes.
a fake
Yes.
phone, and you're
Yes.
like doing
Yes.
your calls.
Yes.
At least I
Yes.
know that was me. Me
Yes.
and my twin sister having our fashion design company, and you're just like I
Our
was
children
listening.
have 10,000 businesses.
Yeah, they always do. Kids
Yes.
do, and we say with our children too. But like, it's just it does put you back in that position of like, oh my gosh, this is exciting, and I
Yes.
can make something.
Yes.
So for me, that would be convivial
Yes.
in
Yes.
that sense.
Yes.
Yeah, and it's there's a mutual beneficial element because you're creating something for others that people can enjoy
Yes.
and
Yes.
have or use or whatever. Like, and yeah, again,
And
and
critically, you could
appreciate.
be an owner easier.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
think it's very hard to get ahead if you don't own. Like you could
Hmm.
even now. I think Thomas Piketty's work. There's some very valid criticisms of it, as Dietrich McCloskey points. But there's this idea that R is greater than G, that returns on capital are greater than growth. Right. Well, you can look at returns on capital as assets or different things.
Yeah.
It's very difficult for average people to own anything.
Mhm.
I think that makes it very difficult for them to get ahead. Now that's a larger argument, but that's
And
part of it too.
and Ivan Illich, if I'm remembering correctly, there's a big idea of two of him. Like, I don't know why I always have this image of him like being coming to the table with
Oh, it
others.
was huge.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
Hmm.
and
The meal.
yeah, the meal. I think there's also something important about this with owning and this childlike possibility of what you create
Yes.
and what you are creating is something you can bring to the table. Because
Yes.
I mean, I think there's
Absolutely.
something absolutely necessary for us humans to have something that you feel like you can show other people.
Yes.
Almost like the kid who's like, "Look at my art, daddy," right?
Yes.
It's like, but what is the thing you're making that you can share in and
Yes.
share with others and be like, this is what yeah, these are the things I've been, I've done a little flip book, every month since I was
Yes.
whatever age, and I built
Yes.
have this past just
Yes.
some random stuff that you've just made, and you get to have you can offer something at the table to say this is something that's uniquely my creation that I've made,
Yes.
and I think that is important because it's both ownership, portfolio, and the sense of offering and being seen and sharing something with another person with other people, and
Well,
so
let's
that
say we got those tomatoes over there, and you've got 500 tomatoes for most of history, and you say, "Well, I want to give these to people." Who are you going to give them to? Your neighbors, because they're the people you can access. And you say, "Well, I want to give them to like anyone." Okay, so you put up flyers, like, how do you market? And then you're
Mhm.
scared to death. Well, I better just give them away because if I sell them, I don't know what the IRS is going to think. And if it's over $700, do I need a business? You get nervous and you say, never mind, I'm just going to give them away because there's too much uncertainty, right? So,
Mhm.
so a clarity of tax law and
Mhm.
structure, a clarity of business
Yeah.
structure, which I think the blockchain can help with, would be a very big deal. But right now, you can get on YouTube and theoretically say, we have 500 tomatoes. It is $1 a tomato. You can meet us at the Russberg Library at 4 p.m. on Tuesday and Thursday if you're interested. That would be, excuse me, valid marketing. Or you can imagine, I'm just saying that's an imaginable thing that you could do. And if you didn't have to worry so much about business or reporting to the IRS or because maybe these systems are better automated. I'm not saying you don't want any taxes at all,
Sure, sure,
because
sure.
ironically, countries that don't pay taxes can actually be under more tyranny by their governments because they
Hmm.
don't depend on the
Yeah,
people for money. So there's a
exactly.
lot of ironies you don't, that can surprise people. But it's the idea that you now have a much more effective means of getting the word out there about something you want to do, with the social coordination mechanism that you could do, if you did not have to worry about regulations and someone getting your tomato and getting sick and then suing you, because just knowing that's a possibility, just dealing with that anxiety, you're not going to do it.
Hmm.
It's too risky. You're not going to do
Hmm.
it until you get an LLC, so you have limited liability corporation. But the point I'm getting at is, and then I'll give it back to you, is just as a vision of so much of when people are like, I can't get ahead, I can't make money, is relative to the regulatory information flow situation that you're in. It's not
Yeah.
just in general, it's relative to the laws and the certifications and the information and the marketing
Hmm.
possibilities of your moment.
Well, there's something here because I want you to answer the question about like the convivial life. Because I
Yes.
think what we're showing is that there's something here where it sounds like, well, you're just kind of, it sounds like you're saying that if you can make money, you could live a convivial life. And it's like, um, the reason why to me, the market stuff is so important is
Yes.
because people look, you do need money to
Yes. Yes.
survive and to
Yes.
buy things and to
Yes.
have a life
Yes.
and to have a
Yes.
family if you
Yes.
want to in a home.
Yes.
So don't
Yes.
we shouldn't vilify money, one. Two, it's not simply about the money. It's about what we were talking about, ownership, having something to offer, something that's
Yes.
particularly
Yes.
unique to who
Yes.
you are, to
Yes.
what you can make,
Yes.
what you can create.
Yes.
So why this has to do with convivial is because also to me, this goes back to like the fact this is almost like in a sense trying to find a um kind of a redemptive place for this kind of a silk road but like in your local area or something like that or like
Yes.
because the silk road's always that was across different countries and all these different cultures but everybody's got microcultures so the
Yes.
idea of being able to do something where you have some sense of commonality enough to be able to have exchange and
Yes.
engagement and conversation is
Yes.
important. Um, but yeah, it doesn't reduce it merely to economic exchange. Now, what would you say to all of that? Like, and then one other point, really quick. Well, I'll come back to that because it's kind of off topic, but
Well,
I'll come
and
back to it. I
again,
won't
we're
forget.
speaking in kind of broad visions, but there's a way in which
It just seems
today
like maybe people are like you're talking a lot about like make
you
business
don't want a world
opportunities.
without money. Money is a language that allows people to cooperate and get along who otherwise would not.
Yeah.
Worlds without money struggle. Now, that's a larger claim, but money is a language
Hmm.
that helps compress difference so people can interact who otherwise would not
Hmm.
interact. And then, of course, without money, then the only people you can sell your tomatoes to are people who can barter with you something you want. And what if whatever they have is nothing you want?
Mm.
So then that they can't get your tomatoes, right? You
Yeah.
have inefficiency, you have coordination inefficiencies.
Yeah.
So money helps deal with coordination inefficiency. But there's a way now in which you know money was made for man, not man for money. But
Mm.
we exist in a world now where it feels like man is made for money. Your entire life is around how to make money,
Mhm.
ironically. And actually, the vision that we're putting forth is where it's not where your entire life has to be shaped to make money. It's where you can shape your life you want and find ways to make money in it,
Mhm.
right? And
Exactly.
that's a massive difference. And the
Yeah.
same, that's kind of
One.
what
Yeah.
Illich is getting at with technology is
Mm.
like right now people's lives feel like you have to do whatever technology is doing
Mm.
as opposed to live the life you want to live and then find ways that technology can enable it,
Yeah.
right?
Exactly.
And I would argue the likely now of course it's a blurry line where one begins and the other, but the probability that technology is serving man versus man technology, that money is serving man versus man money, is relative to the amount of flow the system allows,
Mhm.
the amount of customization, the efficiency of coordination. All of those things increase the probability that you can find ways by which to make the life you want to live, make money, as opposed to figure out how to live a life that makes money.
Mm.
Because you are limited in your coordination possibilities. You are limited by the regulatory structure, the certification structure, and so on and so forth. So the probability under those limitations that you're going to find a way to make money with whatever life you want to live is far lower. Now, maybe the life you want to live, even in the supreme realization of social coordination, nevertheless won't make money, but the probability is far higher. You're going to have a more effective coordination system that's going to enable more possibilities. Conviviality is when you like right now. We can look at it this way as well. Let's look at the character's idea of time energy. You have a system where quote unquote people lack time energy, or they
Mhm.
can feel like they do, and it's hard to have conviviality there. It's hard to have friendliness. It's hard to have community. It's hard to feel like that you're able to say seek things you're passionate about,
Yeah.
meaning, and so on and so
And
forth.
these would all be like aspects of the convivial because yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
The life in which the human feels human. You could
Yeah.
even think hyperhumanism would call Hayden Smith, where humans are more like humans as opposed to fungible,
Yeah.
right? All of that all of realizing time energy and all this stuff, the argument is tied to logistical problem. It's logistics all the way down. It's coordination and logistics all the way down. The moment you talk about society, you're talking about coordination. Coordination problem, von Mises and knowledge problems of Hayek and all of that. And the problem is the only effect we are very, very effective of coordinating things that can be made intelligible by the pricing mechanism. But the fullness of human life entails things that are not intelligible by the pricing mechanism.
Exactly.
Not because the pricing mechanism is bad, but because there's no such thing as a single technology that can do everything well.
Yeah.
And now a dialectic of coordination mechanisms can do it with social
Yeah.
coordination or better at it than social coordination. But the main idea, and to your question, is the convivial life is one of which is going to make you basically you'll be more a way to look at it is what is the difference between waking up one day and saying I've got to pay my bills and I can quote unquote do anything to pay my bills versus the world where you say I've got to pay my bills and I got to find something that pays those bills. The first is way more likely to be convivial.
Hmm.
The second is way more likely to be quote unquote manipulative because
Hmm.
you've got to
And
conform your
manipulated, yeah.
yeah, because you've got to conform yourself
Yep.
to what is going to make
And
money.
that's the irony. You were saying like we're kind of, you know, would you say man, money was made for man, not
Not
man
man
for
for money.
money.
That's
But then
right.
you're kind of trained your whole life to think about what's your job, like what's your
Yeah,
career.
you're literally made to think about what do I need to do to make money.
But you know what? Ironically, or I'm not sure if it's pure irony, but there's a way in which the way the system works right now is, a career track, which is meant to kind of revive this. It's about what you want to do. It's like it's almost should get more honest about it just making money. Cause then you'd be like,
There's a
oh, there's some
disavow. There's a lot of
yeah,
psychoanalytical
like
things going on.
yeah, because I guess what I mean to say is like a lot of the way the structure is set up right now is getting people into debt, not making them feel like, wow, I could really just make money if I wanted to. You know what I mean?
Well, debt is
And it's
money
like,
now. I mean, debt is money, and
yeah, and
there's that talk of egomancer and Jockin on debt that was very important.
yeah, because I just feel like it's almost the way we're talking about money right now is almost this like you're saying it's able to you're actually putting it in its rightful place where you're like no it in a sense what did you say to go back to the phrase money was made for man not man
Man for
for
money.
money,
Yes.
so in a sense man isn't really meant to kind of be
Yes.
reduced to this like just this money thing. However, if the person can, like you said, create their life and within that
Yes.
make the money that they want to in order to facilitate the vision that they have,
Yes.
then that's great. Versus being like I'm under the tyranny of my debt and this
Yes.
career path that I kind
Yes.
of chose because I felt like
Yes.
I had to,
Yes.
and I have to get whatever. I have to get this new accreditation now because otherwise I won't be able to make enough
Yes.
money in my job.
Yes.
Like it's just totally constraining. It's
Well,
totally
but
constraining.
without the social
And
coordination mechanisms, you can argue all of those inefficiencies are necessary because there is no means to effectively coordinate activity without certification, debt, regulation, and all of that different
sure.
stuff. So
And I'm
it's also reasonable that we've ended up in this mess in a certain way because we've had no choice but to overfit due to logistical and coordination limitations.
Yeah, no, I mean it like you're saying, it in a sense make it's there for the reason that it is there.
Problematically, but the true isn't the rational, right? The rational is not a simile for best.
Mhm. Yeah, but it's almost I don't know, there's almost a way in which it makes me think of Postman where he'll talk about like he's not sure why kids aren't able to do certain jobs.
Sure.
Like
Sure.
have it
Yeah.
be
Yeah.
more
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
it's almost I don't like it was almost more about status than it was about literally just like can you like are there avenues to make money,
Well,
now
that
summer jobs for me was that place where it's like oh somebody wants to pay to water their plants, yes. So somebody wants to pay to babysit for this, yes, 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 because you're like I can offer that and it's like when you're younger you have more time on your hands, you may have certain chores or things you help with in your home and your family, but then you also have this time and you want to be able to just read books and lay on a hammock, but you also are like I could make some money, so you go and do these jobs.
yes, but that
um
gets into like Thomas Sowell talks about minimum wage destroying, teenage employment because they could
mhm.
hire someone for $5 to sweep, but they're not going to pay them 22 to sweep, right?
Yeah,
So
yeah,
you
yeah.
cut off the bottom of the ladder, and basically the bottom of the ladder is now schooling in different things. Now there are people that critique that argument, but
Yeah.
that's always been one of the Milton Friedman, kind of the Austrian school's critique of libertarian against
Mhm.
the minimum wage, because they would argue minimum wage is an example of state intervention that had unintended consequences of removing ways that young people could learn,
Yeah.
like just learning to show up on time,
Show up
learning
on
to be
time.
reliable.
Learn yeah, reliable. Do that the job
Yes,
as instructed.
yes,
Did you do it?
yes. You
Yes.
make
Okay.
$5, but
Yeah.
then they're otherwise are on the street or they're addicted to porn or something, right? Because they have nothing to do
To
with
do
their
with their
time,
time. Yeah,
right? Now,
exactly.
again, that argument can be countered, but there's this idea that that is certainly a unintended consequence of trying to pay people more with minimum wage that has an that has an unintended consequence with bad coordination or
Sure.
something like that,
Sure.
right?
Sure. Yeah, and just one more thing I was gonna say on the talking about money, then I'll bring up my point that I was thinking about before. But I bring up Yolanda a lot because she's cool and I like learning from her. But to me, it's so interesting because like she's not like she doesn't shy away from saying like, I'm in this town and I'd love to make some money. Maybe I can
Yes.
come and talk, do a in person thing or
Yeah.
book signing or this or the
Yeah.
other. And I'm always so like it's almost so different to just hear somebody just say like, no, I
Yeah.
have a lot of children and I'd like
Like to make
I'd
money.
like to make some money because
Yes.
I can,
Yes.
and then I can still do the things I love, like, and
Yes.
I can offer the things I love offering.
Yes.
And it's almost like this there's no shame. Like, I mean, sure, I'm sure
Correct.
she's had to deal with and
Sure.
push
Of
through a lot of
course.
her own
Of course.
narratives and
Of
all of that,
course.
and like the fear of, oh, what if
Yes.
people think I'm just greedy and all of the
Yes.
things that people probably do throw on her,
Yes. Of
etc.
course.
But there's like this. there's almost something just kind of like, wow, it just enables her to do more of what she is wanting to offer the world and wanting
Yes.
to give to her family and wanting to give to her community.
Yes.
Like, and it's not bad. It's not thought of. It's not like a bad thing. It's not like she's trying to. So I guess I'm just saying like that spirit of like making money is such a. It's so I want to say it's almost kind of rare to see it, and but I think it's more possible in the social
Way
coordination
more.
mechanism because you
Way
see
more.
people like her online saying things like that, or
But
women or mothers or people, men, whoever it is, like just saying the things on like just saying, "Hey, this is what I do, and this is what the cost is, and if you want it, great. If you don't want it, great." So
well,
go ahead.
there's a way in which if I'm marketing for my corporate job that I have to do to pay my bills and I'm like marketing for that, there's a way in which if I give you money, I'm paying for your enslavement or a certain way. But if I
Mhm.
give you money and it's what you love to do, then I'm supporting you, right?
Yeah.
But that's a that that alienation problem is also tied to a lack of social coordination mechanisms,
Yeah.
right? So there's a way in which we're just very used to people seeking money because they have no choice to seek it, and the thing they seek it in may not equal them. It
Mhm.
may equal them in so much as it's necessary to pay their bills, right? And then also, like, we're very used to paying for products, not ways of life. And this is another thing is we're now entering the age where people are like selling ways of life
Yes.
and like ways of being.
And that
And
kind of gets into your market stuff, like with the testing thing, like where it's
yes,
like you need a rich area of testing out different.
the value forms,
Yeah.
different modes of being and
Yeah.
things like that.
And see which which does well, like
Yeah,
which
and
is.
then throw out your question. But the last thing I was going to say, it's that phrase of that idea of money was made for man, man not for the money is obviously alluding to the idea of the Sabbath. Is the
Yeah.
Sabbath? Jesus says, the Sabbath is made for man, not man for the Sabbath. Well, it's very interesting because when people become possessive about the Sabbath, it can turn into an idol or demonic, or they're using it to kind of attack Jesus, right? But when the Sabbath is, made for man, then it's a kind of fullness of the Sabbath comes out. So it's no different than money. When like money is made for man, it actually enables coordination, enables because you can show appreciation. Like I really value what you do. I can give you $100. It's a way of showing I have skin in the game. It's like a way of me showing I really appreciate it when I don't know what else I could do. Right.
Mhm.
So money allows ways for people to interact that couldn't happen
Mhm.
without it. But the issue becomes there is a certain point where it feels like man is made for money. And I would say that is profoundly tied to coordination and logistic problems and ineffective means of social coordination. Now, I have
Mhm.
more to say on the asset problem. And I also have to say, look, there's a million things because then you also get into like, if you're looking at this more almost libertarian vision, and I won't actually say it necessarily is a libertarian vision,
Mhm. Mhm.
but, there's people like Carl Planier is like, well, who's going to, you need the state in order to do international trade agreements, or if you're going to have international currencies and all this other jazz and legal systems and international law, everything we are saying could be done and the state still be there.
Exactly. I was actually going to bring that up where you see this happening
You can
where
have a gradual reduction of state role as the social coordination
yeah,
mechanism opens everything up. You don't need a
exactly. It
immediate
doesn't have to be a
overturning.
one or the
What
other.
we're trying to do
It's
is have a realistic competition with the state, where the state.
and a realistic working with, as in
Yes.
having
Well,
more.
competition and working with in a weird way go together.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
absolutely.
because like the state would like, well, we would love to offload some of these regulatory roles, but we must do it because there's no coordination system or way that people can regulate themselves effectively. Well, now they can. So the state can be
Yeah,
like, well, we don't have to do that so much anymore. And
sure.
maybe with the blockchain, they're like, well, we don't have to have the IRS so much, right?
Mhm.
So we might see a kind of offloading of state functions more to the social to the degree the social coordination mechanism and all these other things are done. So it's not like an anti-state message,
No,
but really can be more evolutionary in a certain
yeah.
way. But I interrupted you, please.
But asking the question of if you could do anything could be a very helpful question, regardless.
Yes.
Again, not as an anti-state, because again, the state exists and there can be a
Yes,
lot of
it's not anti-state.
beneficial things to
Yes.
this in the state. However, this idea of being able to just tap into I mean, it's really the fundamental kind of question, right? About it. And I know, like psychoanalysis will say, you'll never know what you want, or something,
Yes.
essentially. But what do you want?
Yes.
And being able to, that's the thing, you don't. So make an absolute choice for what it
Yes.
is that
And
you
maybe you
want.
don't know because you don't have the testing and coordination
Yeah.
mechanism to know.
Yeah,
Right?
yeah, yeah. Or give yourself such a, okay, let me try out. Do I want this? Oh, well, didn't
Yes.
work out. Let me choose it. Let me
Yes.
like shift. Let me
Yes.
readjust. Let me
Yes.
recalibrate.
Yes.
So yeah, it's not a once and all for all thing, which I think a lot of times the way that a lot of people are tracked is to think I have to pick a career. Like, you know what I mean? It's this kind of I have to pick a career. I have to pick a path. I have to pick this, and you're really like racking up a lot of investment in that quite monetarily.
And because you
That
have
then
to
you have
make
to like
yeah,
you somebody's paying for that.
because you're given one shot at making yourself intelligible in a field, and you can't go back. It's unrealistic to go back to college at 40 for many
No,
people.
yeah,
It's
exactly.
could you do it? Of course, it's unrealistic, but you can, in a sense, reinvent the way you are perceived by the society quite easily online with the social coordination mechanism. You say, well, no one's going to take it seriously. Well, under the current plausibility structure, where only a college credential is taken seriously, sure. But if that shifted culturally, if you had a different culture, then people could say, try X. They can try to get to become an expert in X when they're 20, find out that it worked in this way and not in this way, then try Y and Z. And you could have this flexibility, as opposed to basically people feel like their entire life is decided by what they do in their 20s, which is an incredibly inefficient coordination system. Like, how in the world do you know what you ought to do in your 20s? You basically are made to feel that way and you get into debt. This is inefficient.
Or you
This
get
is
people rebelling,
inefficient.
like, I don't want that, I don't want respect. So they just kind of like they extend their adolescence for a
Then they
long
extend it
time,
forever.
and
All
then
of
it's
these are
just
inefficient.
yeah, yeah.
These are inefficient. You had a question.
Well, I was gonna just say before, like about we were talking about fast food places. Like
Yes.
when I assess the quality of things today, I do sometimes because I do think unfortunately there has been, especially with corporate types of like
Yes.
chains, et cetera. It's like there's kind of a lessening of the quality. And I do wonder if that's though just me in my when I was a
Yeah.
child in my
Idealizing. Sure. 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 Sure.
idealistic state versus now. But I do think there are like actual real qualitative measures where you're like, no, these are like some of the things I'm looking at, and they're real things like that was different than now. So
I mean, it gets into a lot. I mean, generally, I do wonder. I can't prove it, and I do wonder about it. I do wonder if in inflationary shocks, corporations drop in quality, where say more local places do better, whereas in economic shocks like a 2008 financial crisis, corporations do better and small businesses go out. And if we've had more of an inflationary shock for a while.
yeah.
Then that's a problem. Now, people would counter that because then I guess between 2010 and 2020, people like Yellen, they were trying to create inflation and couldn't get it above 2%. But then some people would argue, well, the numbers are blurred. It's not true inflation. And then we're in the age where we can't trust any of our data. So that's great. But there certainly is some sort of sense. And the problem is with inflation is inflation. And again, I'm no expert, but inflation varies between sectors because if you look at overall inflation, it may be stable, but certain areas like food is going up, where technology is going down because technology is deflationary. But in sectors, I guess I want to say, I think there is reason to think that in sectors where inflation is occurring, even if it's not occurring in the overall economy, you will see corporate quality drop. And actually, in those sectors, you would be better off in smaller businesses or local places or things, whatever those sectors may be. But of course, identifying those sectors may be difficult without a social coordination mechanism. That was an economic thesis that I would not tell you is gospel, but I do think it would seem to me as in if inflation favors smaller enterprises, but that could be false because you can say they're not able to absorb shocks. But
Mhm.
I think it depends on franchise and blah 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 blah. Generally, it does. People do seem to feel as if quality is going down. Maybe it's all just in our heads, but there is that sentiment. I mean, you buy boards and they break quick. You build houses and they seem to fall apart. There is this feeling quality has dropped.
Hmm. Well, yeah. No, that I mean that's important, I think, though, because with this qualitative assessment, it's going to be very important for the convivial society
Absolutely,
in the
absolutely.
convivial renaissance. Like if
If
we're
everybody
talking about
feels like stuff's getting worse, and yet they have to go to a job they don't want to do, they're going to feel manipulated.
well, yes, and if people are going to say, you know what, I'm not going to just use the standard of credentials anymore. They're going to have to assess for themselves.
Then they need to be able
They
to
need to be able
identify
to identify.
quality.
Yes, exactly,
Absolutely.
exactly.
The ability to judge quality is like necessary for the
Yeah, and
convivial
this
life.
kind of gets into our conversation we had for the net on like basically discernment of
Yeah, the social
quality.
coordination mechanism is only going to work if it simultaneously trains the ability to discern
Hmm.
quality.
Hmm.
If it
Hmm.
does not, then it wouldn't. You would be more likely to be manipulated by people and
And we
stuff.
talked a lot about like trying to use energy, like the inner
Yeah,
energy
yeah,
as
yeah,
a
yeah.
as a litmus test for
Yes,
quality,
yes.
which I think is a good one, is a very
Is a
helpful one.
huge one. This is a
I
can of worms. So I know we're already in an hour, but there's a
Yeah,
lot to all of
was
this.
something I was just gonna say really quick though that's kind of funny and that I was thinking about is like um the YouTuber phenomenon. Actually, I was actually thinking about this as it relates to kids seeing this as an opportunity
Yeah.
where they're like, you'll kind of hear like a lot of kids will be like, I want to be a YouTuber when I grow up or something like this, which is funny because if you think back to the 90s, you might be like, I want to be Michael Jordan. Like, you
Yes.
might be able to be a famous sports athlete or
Yes.
like maybe a famous celebrity or something like that. Maybe, you could have a kid being
Yes.
like, I want to be like
Yeah.
my pastor, I guess, but
Yeah.
generally speaking, I'm talking about like trends, right, in the
Yes.
mainstream, and obviously the mass
Yes.
entertainment's going to get those higher trends, but like I was thinking about that and how the gut reaction, I think, can be like, no.
No.
That's the gut reaction, right? For most parents, it's like, no. Um, but I was actually thinking about like maybe something redemptive to that actually. In the sense that not necessarily being like a Twitch streamer or something.
Yeah.
I know, maybe there's something redemptive to
Man,
being a
they can
Twitch
make
streamer.
money
I don't
though.
know.
They can make
Well, but
money.
that's the thing. The main
Crazy.
risk is that it's like here's this promise of making a bunch of money doing like
Video
basically just
games.
playing the video game you
I mean,
like. So
maybe
it's like
we're the idiots, right? I mean, we're
that's
stupid. We're freaking dumb. Wedding venue when you can do Twitch. But then, of course, there's a million people doing Twitch, and you only see in survivor bias and all
yeah,
that
yeah.
different stuff. Or so we tell ourselves.
Well, but maybe I don't know. I guess I was just thinking about this idea of like how do you work with uh the new inherent like wishes and desires of children in the new markets and the new historic moments. And for me, I think there's something about it where it's like, maybe there's a way in which you can have the element of the portfolio at play here, where it's like, okay, you don't necessarily uh like you're not gonna say like how do I put this? It's more about like whatever you can build, whatever it is that you can take. Like, if you're like,
Yes,
okay, maybe this kid could have a YouTube channel one day and be a YouTuber, but
sure.
really, and it's funny, we're on YouTube right now. So it's like,
Yes,
are we YouTubers? I
yes.
mean, not in the sense of like,
Twitch people.
the Twitch people, but the element of it is like this is a portfolio build,
It's a portfolio.
and it's also a
Yes,
connection to other people who have these types of interests to talk about again hope in a moment that could sometimes feel very the world feeling very chaotic, all of the things. So for kids, what I could think about it in a redemptive light is like, well, what's the thing you love or you really are passionate about, like
yes,
basically even if it comes down to recording whatever it is, 10 minutes a week or something, where you do a
yes,
kind of video and you build it up, and you
yes,
don't have a channel, but maybe one day you use that toward a
yes,
channel or something like that. um because we do live in a unique time with the medium of video, which we've talked a little
yes,
bit about, but
yes,
like there's more media generation that can be done, which can be bad. You don't want to get into a mode of like, I have to
yeah,
film it, I have to record it, I have to,
yeah.
like that's
Not
no good.
good.
But yeah, I don't know. I was just thinking about that a little bit because really, like the social coordination mechanism is relying on the funny thing is it's corporation, it's like bigger corporations, but then it's like this decentralized channels, and you can see there at play even that what we said, where it's not just state versus grassroots. This is why you can see like Amazon, but then the reviewing aspect is huge for business, like people
Yes,
coming in and just typing their raw reviews about stuff
can change everything.
is like the decentralized democracy saying
Yes,
this is good and this is bad or whatever it is.
yes,
And I guess that's sort of maybe with Yelp and maybe a prior thing
yes,
before that. But yeah, so it's this is like where people really get to have their say, and
yes,
will but anyways, I was just thinking about this because again, YouTube, Zoom, these are the things that are like really big players in like the social coordination mechanism. Now, could there be other
sure,
like
sure,
things,
sure.
people who are like, we don't like the way YouTube's doing, so we're making our thing
Yes,
great, and hopefully they fare well. If that's something that people want, then it'll happen. But
yes.
yeah, I don't know. That was a little bit,
No, no, no,
yeah.
no. I mean, there's a bunch of
And we
things,
could, I know
and
we may
we
have to
might
wrap
have to
up.
do
Yeah.
another part because
Mhm.
so first, before I forget, there's also an issue where right now, because of regulations, so homes are really expensive. And let's say you
Mhm.
want to own a business, well, then
Mm.
you have two properties.
Yes.
How's that likelihood? But if you were to have one property, your home could realistically make you money. Then the cost of housing would just be the single cost for a place to live and a business. Say if you were able to sell tomatoes or something like that. So you also have regulations that basically make it very, very difficult to monetize a single property, like if you owned one.
Mhm.
Or if you don't own it and you're renting, then there's other restrictions and LLCs and different things. But that there's also issues where basically the spoils go well. The system tends to favor currently, and I think inefficiently, people who are able to own property and multiple properties, and then people who can also hire an account. Like if you get a complicated business accountant and so on and so forth. So that's a part of this. Then another part of this is right now. Look, the regulations if you have a Twitch account are very low. The regulations if you have a restaurant are very high. So
Exactly.
it's simply incentives.
Exactly.
Legal incentives are going to have most people using YouTube in the direction of Twitch or stuff that you would say is not valuable.
And
Well,
they can do it from their home, and then maybe they're making money from their
yeah,
home.
they can make money from their
You know.
home, but then it's just I don't know what the form. Then it's a very simple tax thing,
Mhm.
and your liabilities are low, and you don't you don't need employees. you got to hire employees. Stuff, the risk and the liability and the law and everything is just through the roof, and
Hmm.
cost and things. So of course, YouTube, the monetization potential that YouTube is going to be used for is going to favor the low hanging fruit legally and in terms of taxation. And that's going to be like the Twitch stuff. That is what we're going to see. If that were to change, and you could imagine a child like, because the other thing is, if you see YouTube as enabling the portfolio, which is superior to the resume. When I had a photographer, when I would work photography for 15 years,
Yeah.
no one asked me my resume. They wanted my
They
portfolio.
want your
They
albums.
want your albums.
Yeah.
Portfolio is superior to resume. And for most of history, we didn't have a realistic way to get portfolios in multiple fields. Well, now you have videos. I can see you teaching on Hegel. I can see the community you're running, right? I can see it. I can visit it. I can try it. So the portfolio is now more available in more fields than just photography. The portfolio was very limited in the fields that it could enable for most of history, but YouTube can be seen as basically extending portfolio potential to many, many other fields. But if a child or someone could create board games, and then sell those board games, and they could market them, and the legal and regulatory burdens for doing so were low. I think if you make over $700, you've got to file taxes. That should be like 7,000, and
Hmm.
basically, especially if they're under 18
Yeah.
or something, right? If they make over 10,000 and they're, yeah, then we can do it. But $700, I mean, $700 is going to Sam's Club one time. So that's an issue. And then the kid's like, I'm scared. I don't know how to do these forms. And then the parents are like, I have to file extra taxes. And how do I get there? What do I get? An EIN or something like that? An employment identification number? Or I use their social. So then it's a sole proprietorship. But then they could be legally liable if somebody sues them. So you're like, well, I better do an LLC. And you're like, I don't want to think about it. So let them do Twitch. I mean, let them do Twitch. And even then, yes, there are various business forms you have to structure, but it becomes the lower hanging freaking fruit. So, and then there are other things where, imagine if people, like, you had a kid that was starting a leather business, like making leather at 15, and you saw them and said, I think they're really talented. I'm going to buy equity in them when it's cheap, because, and then their value by the time they're 25 has made you $100,000, and people might be investing in the youth. Like everyone right now, and I know all of that has to be expanded on, because then you can talk about manipulation and predatory stuff. But the point is, there's also this major problem of people being like, the older generation doesn't invest in the youth,
Hmm.
right? Yeah, well, they're putting all their money in the stock market or their Roth IRA or their property value, and they're building. The equity is going, the value of the homes are going up and stuff, right? They're building equity that way, right? What if there were better ways by which people could invest in the youth this way, using the social coordination mechanism or Web 3.0, right? These are all possibilities that have to be considered, but none of them are realistic without the social coordination mechanism. And we don't know how the social coordination mechanism is going to be used, but I certainly think that any possibility of a convivial life without it isn't going to happen. We have to have it for any possibility of convivial life. And maybe this experiment works and that experiment doesn't, but no experiments can be realistically run without it. But I'll throw it to you on, and I know we're out of time, but there's a lot of things. There's a lot of things.
Yeah, no, I don't know that I have much more to add. Just to say that the term we've have brought up in the past that's coming to my mind right now for some reason, it's just social imagination.
Yes,
Like I think
yes.
part of the convivial life is also
A
the
social, yeah,
expansion of
expanding the
social
social imagination.
imagination. Yeah,
100%,
yeah.
100%. We just simply, people can't imagine a truly decentralized society. They can't imagine it. They can use the word decentralization all day, but what they typically think when they think decentralization is, well, Bitcoin and then speculative crypto markets. And yeah, a lot of that technology is being used for speculation, but sure, like stuff was used for, many new technologies are used in nefarious ways when they start until people figure out the right way to use them, right? And that gets into a bigger topic, but most decentralization is basically, in America, certainly, states' rights, the states, the 10th Amendment, and
Mhm.
things like that. But a truly decentralized life is going to be more in this direction of people being able to effectively coordinate their life in a way to make money, as opposed to making their life conform to what makes money.
Mhm.
You
Mhm.
will not have, let me put it this way. You can talk about decentralization all day. You can talk about new possibilities of the future all day, until you have a world where people can imagine the life they want to live and try this and try that. And it's not merely want, because you've got to experiment and make trade offs and sacrifices and so on, and do that and then feel as if in doing that, they're going to be realistically able to find ways to make money. That's a world where decentralization is meaningfully possible. But if you're in a world where people still feel like they have to pick the life that will make money,
Mm,
there is no decentralization.
mm.
There is no even true individual. There's a sense in which there's not even individuation there because
Yeah.
everyone is just conforming to the value form of the money. And that's not that money is bad, just like the Sabbath is not bad. But it's when the Sabbath is made for man, not man for the Sabbath, right? But that requires the ability of people to actually live the life that they want to live. So until that happens, there's not decentralization. It's not happening. You don't even have real individuation. And there's a sense in which the rugged individualism of America doesn't even exist.
Mm,
Like the American dream of that kind of pull yourself up by the bootstraps, there's a sense in which that's true, sure, but there's another sense in which that's just going to function as a kind of ideology in favor of getting you to live the life that makes conforming your life to money,
yes.
as opposed to pulling yourself up by the bootstraps and whatever vision that means for you, then being enough social mobility and flexibility and flow in the system by which to then find ways to make money from that way of life that
Mhm.
you've made for yourself. Those are very different things.
Yeah, and I think why money is coming up so much as it relates to the convivial society is, I think a lot of people aren't talking about money, but it's in the background when it comes to like, you know, YouTube and like the social coordination mechanism and all that. And I think the other thing too is like, I mean, we're always big proponents of, having when you're able to just sort of like realize, well, what's something that needs to be done, and I am willing to work hard
Yes.
to do that. There's a lot of job opportunities
Yes.
actually, and you can always do that in conjunction with the other
Yes.
things you're
Yes.
doing.
Yes.
Um,
Yes.
yeah, but I guess I was also thinking though, the reason why it matters so much is because, we were talking about the concept of appreciation.
Yes.
Well, appreciating your life is a big part of the convivial, and appreciating others is a big part of the
Yes.
convivial, in my opinion.
Yes.
And so there's a part in which like the economic term of appreciation is like when things go up in value, right?
Yes.
Up in value. So, yeah, I think there's something that's can be really like there should be something like that feels on phenomenological level like exciting, like
Yes.
hopeful, like there's
Yes. There's
there's
something
there's there's a
hopeful.
there's a chance here, there's a possibility.
Yes.
And there's
Yes.
appreciation for that. And it's almost like the sky's the limit, really, like in a
Yes.
sense that wow, I can create something. And I think yeah, there's something that's really important here, because but you won't be able to do that until you have some, I think, a radical sense of the value that you have and that you are able to offer as well.
Yes.
But nobody can do that. Like literally, nobody can do that for you. And a lot of people have relied on the externality, or like the what's the opposite of the centralized thing, to tell them that you've got the value,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
Versus being like, no, I'm going to believe in this value and I'm going to offer it in this decentralized structure.
Yes.
Like I do think that decentralization can only work when people have this kind of non-rational
Yes. It
evaluate,
has to. They have to
yeah,
be able to judge for themselves what
appreciation of
is value.
value, right?
Yes.
Exactly, of
And
themselves and of others too.
yes, and to also have kind of courage
Yeah,
and belief in
courage.
themselves to
Yes,
step out and say, "Well, I
yes.
think I can sell my photography. I think I can sell my
Exactly, and not
tomatoes."
and have to fight your ego because, oh, what if I look like I'm like
Yes.
just
You have to
yeah,
relinquish your
what
image, and
what if I
people.
look like I'm valuing myself too much, or da da
Yeah,
da,
or and what if people think I just want money, or so
Yeah,
on and
yeah,
so
yeah, yeah,
forth. There is a sense, and again, there is
yeah.
a certain sense in which we can say something like, until you have a world where someone can say, because there's a lot of elderly people who need
Mhm.
care,
Yeah.
right? And there's a lot of people that could say, go over and sit with them, right? And there's a lot of people that don't have certification or training to do that, but could just go over for 3 hours. Imagine a world where people could make $50,000 a year doing that because they had effective social coordination. They didn't have to fill out any business. They didn't have to get any certification. They just went over and they hung out with elderly people, create a community or something. And then at the end of the year, sure, you have taxes. So the IRS, it says, how much money did you make? I made 50,000. Okay, here's the amount of tax you owe, and you go from there, right? And that's the extent of the paperwork.
There you go.
And maybe it's all kept on the blockchain to see every time you made a transaction with the elderly people, right? So the blockchain could be like all the B Corp LLC stuff could go away to a certain extent. Now that's idealistic, but the point is there has to be a world where like people's inability to make money reflects the legal and certification limitations of the age. If you said I really need to pay for my mortgage next week, well, I have no training in sitting with elderly people, but I'm pretty sure I could go sit with some elderly people and just be there. Yes, I am pretty confident most people could do that or learn to do that and make money that way and then just fill out the amount they make with the IRS. Do you see what I'm saying? Like
Mhm.
lowering the bar and just like
Maybe sorry, go ahead.
like if people were allowed to work like 50 different jobs as opposed to what, do you see what I'm
I do,
saying? Like
yeah,
looking like you could just do
100%.
50 different jobs. Because the thing
But
that
that's why I've always loved, like, to me, the summer job structure was always so exciting and fun because they were like, "Oh, just like this people got some stuff
like one
they
of the
need done,
stupid
and
now I'm
I
yelling.
can do I'm, whatever I
Yeah,
age
like
I am,
now
I'm
I'm yelling,
16
but
and
like
I
with the
can
LLC, you've got to give them the code of what kind of business it is, right? So you feel limited to
they
music
better keep it,
education
yeah.
or whatever, right? You have an LLC and you can do whatever. Just report like
You
here,
just
here's your
report what you did.
structure. How much did you make? There you go. The fact that there has to be some sort of matching of the if people were allowed to have 50 different jobs and do 50 different things to make the amount of money and they didn't have to worry about any of those legal limits. That is a different world
It
where
is.
people may not feel like they're doomed because they can't pay their bills. They're going to take care of these elderly people in January and make 10,000. They're going to do selling their tomatoes in June and make 10,000 here. Then they're going to walk dogs here and they could do a myriad of different and they would be more human. They
What
would be more human.
what
That's also the convivial vision because Illich is always talking about people do one job and they're disabled and everything else, so they're not human. But
mm,
if you could easily do 50 different tasks, you would also be excited to learn because everything you learn, you could easily bring into a new money making operation. I'll stop.
what if people say, "Well, like, Daniel, the like, making the bar lower means that people are gonna maybe just do it for money, so they're gonna be like
Sure.
they're not gonna be very loving
And then
toward
we
them."
will and then
They're
we will run the experiment to see if people that do it just for money have a higher quality than people who don't. And if the people who do it just for money have a higher quality, who cares? Do you see
Yeah.
what I'm
Well,
saying?
I mean, the thing is, like, I for me, like, this is where, it's not, did I do a good job with babysitting and go above and beyond because I wanted to get hired again, but I also
Yes.
did it because I love the families and I love
Yes.
taking care of the
Yes.
taking care of things beyond what I was expected to. Does that mean I was only doing it for the money? Well, I mean, I did want to be hired
It doesn't
more,
matter.
but
There's
I
a
also
certain way
did,
it
but
doesn't matter where you
but I also
hired.
did a good job because I enjoyed it.
Yes,
Like,
but it in a sense doesn't matter
well,
because the quality was
we
there.
assume that setting the bar high for all these accreditations and all these hurdles that it'll make people actually care about their job more. It
Not
doesn't.
necessarily
People
at
hate
all.
their jobs. I'm
Yes,
sorry.
it's not.
People. It
We
doesn't
need
mean anything. A lot of people are bitter because of their debt, and then they're not really fully present to be able to be with the elderly person because they're like, I had to do all this stuff, and I've got all this stuff. Do you see what I'm saying?
yes,
Because I guess there's this. I think that people do think, oh well, if you're just gonna sit with the elderly people to make money, you'll never learn how to sit with elderly people just to be there.
yes, and
Never mind the fact that like
that's all just
we have
narrative to justify the current system. The entire idea. So there's a real win. There is an assumption now that making money means you are a doctor,
greedy.
an
Oh,
engineer, like
sorry.
a single thing. Well, greedy, yes, but also a single thing. Why
Yeah,
can't
yeah,
you
yeah, yeah.
imagine a world where people make money by doing 70 things?
But that is thought of as juvenile. Like, oh, you must just be a teen doing, you know.
Possibly. There is a
What?
bias against the jack of all trades. There's a
That's
bias
what I'm
against the
saying.
rest.
Like, there's
And
I don't know
maybe
why. I don't think it should be that way, but I'm saying
maybe
that
there should
people.
be. We have to run the test. I'm saying the infrastructure is not there to determine if that bias is justified. Maybe people who do 50 things a year, yeah, they're bad at it. So then the market will select them out.
Go beyond.
But we can't meaningfully run that test without changing the legal and certification regime and opening up the social coordination mechanism. Do you see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Like, if you just assert that, fine. But there's no testing. There's no way to test and find out.
Mm.
Do you see what I'm saying? And also, right now, like, there's a lot, like, I do think this is, and yeah, maybe we'll talk again. But
Yeah. Let's do a part two.
there's everyone's doing the gig economy thing,
The
okay?
gig. The
Where
gig.
everyone's like driving for Uber and they do like
Oh,
five different side
gigs.
hustles.
Okay.
I would argue the economy is actually already going in the direction I am describing. It just can't do it well because of the social without a social coordination mechanism and the certificate. I almost said stupid, but the regulatory and certification system sets limits
Mm.
on how the gig economy could develop to become a kind of marauder, a multiplicity economy, if you will, that actually could work very, very well, but the limitations make it have a gig economy that just means you're basically a lot of these people just do seem to be basically under feudal lords.
Mm. Mhm.
And
Yeah.
the economy is pushing in the direction of people having many jobs,
Yep.
right?
Yep. And you can see that. Like, even if I think I don't know why I keep going back to the social imagination. Like, you see this on social media. You'll see, and I see a lot of, like, because it's women
Yes.
mothers who you can see how they're like, oh wow, they've diversified their portfolio,
Yes.
and they're offering, like, or even just take somebody who's really big, like somebody like Hannah
Yes.
Newman with Ballerina Farms.
Yes.
They have their online store, but they also have physical store. They have this, they have that,
Yes.
there, they have like there's, and she does pageants sometimes. What in the
Yes.
past she has.
Yes.
It's like you're doing all this stuff. You're doing all this
Yes.
stuff because
You have to. You
Yeah,
kind of have to, and
well,
or
yeah,
people feel like they have
and
to,
this is the cool thing about like
and
we're
maybe you
talking.
want to.
Well, this is why it relates to convivial. Not only do you have to, but you also make you can. The convivial life shows that this possibility of being able to want to. You want to do these things. You've
Yes.
got a dream for this stuff. You're making it happen. You're doing it, and
Yes.
you're like, wow, you're just making it happen. You
It
know what I
is
mean? And
way the
and what I guess I'm just saying that I think what you're saying is spot on because I think you're seeing that more and more people
yes.
are doing these. It's basically multiple irons in the fire,
Yes.
and they're creating so much stuff, and then they're creating possibilities for their children and their children's children, and
The
and yeah.
the
Anyways,
market makes it way too hard to make money off of doing a bunch of things. It is way too limiting. It is the opportunities of investment are too limited. The ease by which you can make money off of doing 50 different things is way too hard. And the IRS goes nuts. Like if you I mean the IRS is not going to like, oh, you got 50 different income sources, that's not good. And also you got to have an you basically have to set up a different LLC for every single different business. So people can't do this. But if they could do it, especially with a with a means of making intelligible their diversity that is far easier than traditional marketing with the social coordination mechanism, then you are going to that opens major economic opportunities for people. That also makes the average person more enabled because the key to disablement and Illich is this kind of you do one thing and you're an expert in that and then you're relying on the expert class for everything else. Well, you're actually able to make money off of doing many different things, right? So there's a higher chance you're going to be enabled, and there would be more incentive for lifelong learning, right? Because right now it's like, well, with AI, you're going to have to be a lifelong learner and do different. The people are like, no, I don't want to have to keep learning in this one narrow field forever. Well, what if I told you you could like learn anything you wanted, and the bar of making money off of many things would be far lower, so you could do well? Well, that changes everything. That changes the culture. That changes the social coordination. So there's a real way that
and I think there are starting to be people who just be like, I don't care that these people aren't like actually credentialed in this stuff. I see that they're successful. I
because
like
people are
them. I
not
like what they're
because
doing.
people don't trust the
I,
credentials.
and I want to invest in that. So
There's a legitimization crisis in that Habermas sense,
yeah.
and I actually think the social coordination mechanism could help like the institutions because they'll
Mhm.
have to compete with it and do better and raise their quality. I can see like if people can use their homes as restaurants, why would you go to Burger King? Well, then Burger King has to get better or it goes out. Do you see what I'm saying? Like the social coordination mechanism actually allows competition that I think would make many of the corporations better. Um,
Yeah.
so yes, lowering the bar. A big part of all of this is lowering the bar to make it far easier to make money off of doing many things, and to also make it far more likely that the life you want to live, you can find a way to make money, as opposed to picking a life that makes money. Very different things. There are many more things to say on this, but we are just today beginning to kind of paint a broad sort of picture of what a convivial life would look like, a convivial renaissance. And I do think there is going to be a paradigmatic shift in the economy. AI is going to force it.
Yeah.
And I think it's coming anyway. And I think what we're trying to say, or at least paint, is what exactly that paradigmatic shift may look like
Yeah.
and how the social coordination mechanism could help.
Mhm.
But for more by OG Rose, please visit ogrose.com, Twitter, Spotify, Instagram, Amazon. All purchases of the books are greatly appreciated. Reviews are greatly appreciated. There are playlists of the books with summaries and different things. We'd love to know your thoughts. And thank you so much for your time.
Thank you for your time. Bye.